Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another Adobe XD Daily Creative Challenge. My name's Howard Pinsky, Senior XD Evangelist here at Adobe, and I hope you're all doing well on this Thursday afternoon, or as I like to call it, almost Friday. We've almost made it through the week, which also means we're almost through the Adobe XD Daily Creative Challenge, at least this round. We've got definitely more coming up in 2021. And I think there might be another one coming up after this. I still haven't figured that out, but I will get around to that. If you are tuning in chat on Behance today, let me know who you are and where you're tuning in from. We've got Anahit from Boston. We've got Sam and Laura and Kareem, Ariana, Islam, Cody, and Ankita. It's 3:30 in the morning where Ankita is. 3:30 in the morning. Oh boy. Lexine. Great to see all of you. Ruth, Carmen from Toronto, hometown. Great to see people from Toronto and Canada joining us in our creative challenges. All right, so day number 8 is upon us. It's exciting, but also sad because tomorrow, oh, and Jason from Toronto as well. Great to see everyone. All right, so second to last day. Things are getting exciting, right? We've tackled a lot so far, but if you've missed some of these challenges, you can definitely go back, re-watch some of that, and participate. So every single day you're going to receive a challenge, Monday to Friday, except the first Monday. You can join us in our community chat on Discord. Click on that link. It'll open up. We've got Ruth from Tasmania. Ooh, that's exotic. I've never been to Tasmania. Cameron from Oakland. Hey, Marielle, welcome. So you can join us in Discord. Over 55,000 designers. You can get all the information about the daily challenges, ask questions, share tips and tricks. It's a good time in there. You can watch me live, 2 o'clock Pacific time every single day, Monday to Friday, and then there'll be another host during the next challenge. You can share your work on Behance using the keyword XD Daily Challenge or on Discord as well. So, very quickly, last week we started the process building out a landing page using background blur to add a little bit of depth. We went on to build out an interactive map using scroll groups. We explored a drop-down menu or a notification center using nested hover. Card flip using auto animate and 3D transforms, augmented reality, and again, I mentioned yesterday, that was one of my favorite daily challenges that I've hosted. It was a good time. Go watch that video if you missed it, using 3D transforms. Presentation templates using components and states. Yesterday, we tackled a slide out menu using component states. And then today, we're going to be building out a browsable music library for an iPad using repeat grids. And we're going to share a lot of tips and tricks. This one's going to be packed. I've been working on this design all morning, and I don't think I'm going to get through all of it, which is why I'm going very quickly. So let's go ahead and grab the starter file just like that. Click on that link. It's going to open up Creative Cloud in just a second. It's going to download the file directly to your computer, and in a second, it's on my other monitor. It opens up directly in Adobe XD, which is wonderful, right? All right, here's some inspiration. Really fun, dark mode, light mode, great colors, right? But we're going to dive straight into things because I want to get designing. This one's going to be a fun one, I think. And if I don't get through all of it, what I'm thinking of doing for this particular design, because I like it a lot, I might make a separate video, or maybe it'll be a masterclass. I'm not sure. No masterclass tomorrow, by the way. We have a day off. All right. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start the process. Now, I will note that this is an iPad portrait view. If you do want a landscape view, just hop over here to the Properties Inspector and boop, press that button over there. So completely up to you whether you want to do landscape or portrait. Have fun with it. All right, we're going to start the process with a nice big header image. This might be maybe the featured song or featured album or whatever it might be that's part of this music application, right? So we've got a nice image right here at the top, or at least a shape that's going to house this image. Now, a lot of ways to get images into Adobe XD, but if you have images on your computer that I grabbed from Adobe Stock, this is a great looking image right here. Very futuristic, Tron-like. Just boop, pop it directly into the shape on the mask, right? And I can double click, makes it a little larger, just to really focus in on her amazing, I don't know what these things are called. I want glasses like those. Those just look super cool. I would wear them all over the place. And there we go. We've got a pretty good looking image at the top, right? It's going to really set the stage for this particular music application. Let me just frame this a little bit better. There we go. Perfect. All right. Now, in addition to this, because this is definitely kind of going on that cyberpunk, futuristic, neon vibe, we may want to add a few extra shapes and get a little bit fancy with this, right? So the first thing I'm going to do to get a bit fancy with it, I'm going to double click on the actual shape to access the path, and I'm just going to bring this up a little bit, just like that, right? You can either bring it up on that side or you can bring it down on this side, whichever way you want, just to give a little bit of an angle to this, right? Cornell says, hey, beautiful people, you're all so beautiful. All right, next in the background behind this, we're gonna want maybe another shape, right? So I'm gonna grab my pen tool and start right about, let's say here, right on this side, and click. And I'm gonna go all the way down to the end here, click, and just finish it up here. Now, I'm not too worried about what this top section looks like because it's going to be hidden, right? We're gonna actually pop it behind. If I hop into my layers panel, boop, just like that. Now you can always double click on it if you want to adjust it a little bit. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm actually gonna backtrack it. You know what? I'm gonna edit the path a little bit more, right? At a point right about here, just so that I can bring this down a touch. There we go, right? All right, now for this one, we're going to hop over to Finder, and I've got this lovely pattern. I think I've used this in a past challenge. Boop, pop it directly in there. And now we want one more shape, right? So I'm gonna duplicate, Command and Control D, and double click to access the path one more time, and just adjust this. You can do that as well, or what you can do, if I undo this, I can just create another shape, right? So just like this, just like I did a minute ago, just like that, up, down, and close, right? Change the color, move it behind, and pop in one more shape. Now, that's obviously looking a little bit strange, right? So there's two things we're gonna do, actually. One thing I'm gonna move this down a touch. On this shape right here, I actually wanna change I wanna add a border. On the outside of this shape, which is this icon right here, just like that, it's gonna be a nice thick border just to separate these two shapes, right? But I want to change the background color a little bit of the artboard. So I'm going to double click on the artboard, or you can select the artboard by clicking on the label right at the top. And I want to change the color. It's going to be very light, but I'm going to add a little bit of like a pinkish red, just a tiny bit, right? Hey, Charlie, welcome. You joined the first, probably your first live session. Great to see you. So I'm going to add a little bit of color, just a little bit of pink. This week's cyberpunk themes are so legit. I know. Aren't they fun? So I want to sample with the border just like that, just to add a little bit of separation between these two shapes, right? And it almost looks like they kind of match up a little bit. And I can double click to adjust the padding or the mask. Ooh, look, almost got it. There we go. Look at that. Now, I may not want the colors to be identical. So I showed this in one of my previous challenges. What you can do is you can duplicate this particular shape, and I'm going to change the color to, let's say, a little bit of a purple. I'm going to move this one behind, and on this shape here, I'm actually going to change the blend mode to, let's say, hard light. Looks pretty good, right? And of course, you can tweak this if you need to. But I'm kind of digging that. It's kind of looking pretty nice. And I can always double click, make changes to the mask if I need to, but I'm liking it. I think this is looking pretty good. Now I'm going to do some organization inside of here. This will be purple. We've got the pink one, and that's looking pretty good, right? All right, so that's looking nice. Now, what I'm going to also do is I'm going to group all of these elements together, all these background elements. So Command and Control G, turn this into a background group. Now, this will be important once we get to additional elements on this section here, but because we're focusing on repeat grids in this particular challenge, if we have time towards the end, we'll get back to this top section. But let's move on down here, and we're going to create maybe the recommended for you section. So I'm going to grab my text tool. You can also do that shortcut key T, click, and wow, what is happening? What font did I choose? Color tube. Wow, okay. Well, let's run with it. I can't even see it. Okay, let's not do that. Let's make this much smaller so I can see what I'm typing. And I'm going to change this to the mastra typeface I've been using lately. Did I spell that right? Recommended for you. There we go. Now, the red probably isn't working. I'm also going to change this to title case, just like that. So let's go ahead. I'm going to sample this background color. Now, obviously, you can't see it, but I'm going to just drag this color picker down just a little bit, right? just to kind of keep it along in the same kind of family. So there's a little bit of red in there. So it all kind of has this cohesive feel to it. And I might want to bold this a little bit. Now, obviously this is way too large, probably. So let's say 24. And what I always recommend, if you're designing, very close in, just press the play button at the top so you can see how things are looking from a distance. Let's try 32. That might be too big though. That might be too big. Let's go back to 24, right? And I'll pop it right about here. Perfect. All right. So now we can start building out the first repeat grid. And to do that, I'm going to grab my rectangle and draw one out just like this. And these might be recommended albums, for example, right? I might want to round out the corners just a little bit. Let's go for 16 pixels. It looks pretty nice. And change the color, turn off the border. We probably don't need that. And then underneath, we might want to put the album name. We might also want to put the artist name, for example, right? Daniel says, these lessons are great as I'm learning. I've always been strictly print. That's great to hear, Daniel. Great to have you too. So I'm going to click one more time and let's go ahead and type out album name, just as a placeholder, right? I'm going to make this a little bit smaller, quite a bit smaller actually, 16 pixels. I may not want it as bold. This one's pretty bold. So I'm also thinking, the mastra typeface looks good when it's like 24 pixels or above for these headers, right? But when you get really small like this, you might want to drop down to something a little bit more traditional. Poppins is a pretty good example, right? And I might want to go semi-bold or even medium, just so it's not too strong. I don't know, maybe semi-bold. I think semi-bold could work. Move this up a little bit, about 6 pixels, looks pretty good. Again, preview, take a look. Okay. Now, next one, this is going to be artist name. Now this is secondary information for the most part, so we could drop this down to about regular. That looks pretty good. We'll keep the same color, we'll keep the same opacity. The fact that we just dropped it in weight should do, right? All right, so again, preview, take a look at how things are looking. I'm kind of digging it, right? So now we might want a few additional albums going across this artboard, right? We've got one, we want more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all 3 of these elements. You can do that with a marquee selection, or you can select them all within your layers panel. And then right here at the top, we're going to press repeat grid. Now, I expect all of you, as I press this, to repeat after me. Boop. There we go. All right, we've got a repeat grid. So we have our 2 new handles, one on the right and one at the bottom, and we can just drag out additional albums, just like this, right? And let's go about, I don't know, we'll give a little bit of spacing in between. 40 pixels looks pretty nice. Now, of course, it's not centered, so I could go ahead and just center this like that. Or if I wanted to, maybe we'll make this a little bit larger, just so we have a little bit of extra room, right? Command and Control R for another repeat grid. 40 pixels, and make sure all of this is centered. I'm also going to group these elements just like this, and I'll just call this recommended. Perfect. So we have our first repeat grid looking pretty good, but of course it looks kind of boring. We need some content in there. A lot of ways to add content to a repeat grid. We'll start with the basic, and then we'll get a little bit fancy in just a second, right? So I'm gonna hop over to Finder. I've got 3 images here that I want to use as these album. I mean, look at this. Look. You can't beat that. Every single design should have some sort of cat with sunglasses. So I'm going to grab all 3 of these images and boop, drag them directly into the grid. And now if I want to, I can double click on any of them and adjust the mask like that, but it looks pretty good. Kind of happy with that. Now you can do the same thing with plain text documents. So I've got over here a list of albums. Simple, plain text document. Drag this right there. I can do the same thing with artists. Drag that right there, and looks pretty good. Now, one of the cool things about repeat grids, and you're going to see this in action in our next example, is that if you need to make stylistic changes, if you want to center things, right, you can do that just like, just like that. Or if you need to make it a little bit smaller, just drop it in size a touch. That looks pretty good. Drop this inside, and it syncs throughout the entire repeat grid. There we go. All right, I'm digging how this is starting to look out, right? Maybe I'll bump this up a little bit more, 48 pixels. Center this. There we go. All right. Charlie's saying you should upload to Discord. Oh, so what I can do, I can upload these plain text documents. I can't upload these because I license them from Adobe stock and I can't distribute those. But the next example, which we're going to get to right now, actually, I might be able to upload some of that. So next, what we're going to do is we're going to create maybe the recently played section. So just to make my life easy, I'm going to grab this text layer, paste it, and move it on down here. This will be recently played. Now this section is going to have a little bit more information. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to grab my ellipse tool actually and draw out the album. Maybe we'll put it in ellipse this time. Could be interesting, right? And then to the right, we're going to put, let's say, the album. And again, because this is much smaller, we probably don't want to go for the mastra text. My mind just went blank. Typeface, that's the one. I was reading Danny's comment. How do you create a plain text document? Notepad on your computer, or what's it called? Notes on, I used Atom, but basically any sort of text editor, you can do that. And just make sure to put TXT at the end of it. So in this case, we're gonna go back to Poppins, good old Poppins. Let's go for semi-bold, and this is a much smaller area. So we're gonna drop this to about 16 pixels. And again, we're going to be using a repeat grid, so we can always make changes to that later. Let's go for 24 pixels from the left-hand side here. And then over here, we might want to put the artist. I can drop this in weight. It is secondary information. And then maybe the length, right? So this would be, eventually it's going to be maybe like 2 minutes and 34 seconds, right? So we're going to put length for now. Again, placeholder. And then we might want a little bit of a heart over here so you can favorite these songs. So one of my favorite Easter eggs in Adobe XD, I think it is the only Easter egg in Adobe XD. I'm going to grab the polygon tool, draw out a polygon just like that, right? 3-sided polygon. But over here within your properties inspector, you're going to put, instead of 3, you're going to put less than 3 and then press return. And you've got a lovely heart, right? Looks pretty good. Now I can set the border to maybe this color here, turn off the fill, and maybe increase in size just a little bit. There we go. All right, so we've got some information, and I'm going to make sure that all of these are nicely distributed, just like that. So we've got some information about our particular, I'll get to your, so Karen has a question, I'll get to that in a second. We want to make sure to, get ready for the repeat grid. And one more thing I might want to add is a background to these particular areas. So I'm going to grab my rectangle, draw one out just like this. Make it a little bit larger than the actual album image. Maybe I'll set the color to black and then maybe multiply it, see what that looks like. Or maybe I'll set it to, maybe I'll sample this color here and just drop the color a touch. And then just drop the opacity, just so it's very subtle. We're going to use this as a hover effect, right? All right, so Karen is asking in the chat that multiply, so blend modes in general probably do not export, and they don't. That's, your computer doesn't really, it needs something behind it to interact with. And if you just have a standard PNG, there's nothing behind it to interact with. So blend modes just typically do not export as you would expect. And that I believe is by design. Operating systems don't really support blend modes like that. All right, so that's looking pretty good, right? And again, we're going to use this as a hover effect. So what I want to do now is I've got this ellipse. I'm going to, you know what? We're going to get to that in a second. We are going to get to that in a second. So I want to turn this into a repeat grid now. We've got all this information that we're going to be using. So I'm going to select all these elements. And like we did before, hit the repeat grid button at the top, just like that. And now we can drag out a few additional entries going down our artboard, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's go for 7. It's a nice number, right? Just like that. We'll have a little bit of space in between, right? Now, again, we need some content. Now, like we did before, we could go to Finder, grab some images, drag them directly into the grid. But one thing that I absolutely love, one of my favorite plugins, is Google Sheets. So let me hop over to Safari for a second. And I've got this Google Sheet right here. And this one I can probably provide in Discord. I can also just pop it in the chat right now. if you want to follow along a little bit later. So I've got this Google Sheet containing a bunch of album names, a bunch of artist names, some lengths of the songs or albums, and some links to images. And you might be in a situation where you're working with somebody who is controlling all of this data and wants to keep it up to date. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this link just like that, hop back over to Adobe XD. I have the repeat grid selected. I'm going to go to my plugins panel down here at the bottom. And I've got the Google Sheets plugin installed right here. You can press the plus button at the top to find and install plugins. And what I want to do is paste the public URL. You can also link your Google Sheet account or your Google Drive account if you want to. It's going to import all of that content of that Google Sheet, and it's going to do its best to map out the column names, these ones right here, with the layer names, which is why I named them album, artist, and length. It's exactly the same as what I have here, right? Now, one thing I did not do is I didn't add a label name, or I didn't name this image, right? Or this circle. So what I can do here in the plugins panel, this one looks pretty good. Artist maps to artist, album maps to album, but the ellipse is not mapped. So I'm going to go ahead and map it manually. And now I press apply, and what happened? Oh, did I put the wrong? Oh, I did put the wrong one. So this, no mapping on this one, and image on this one. And now, no, okay. Let me redo this. Sometimes it just, I'm going to change this to image. There we go. Let's try this one more time, shall we? Image to image. And there's like weird spacing, so it throws me off. Let's see if that fixed it. There we go. That's much better, right? Now we have content in our particular repeat grid. Now I'm going to go ahead and double click on the artboard just to pull this down so I can see all of these elements. Now, one thing we don't want, I'm going to zip through this quickly, is we don't want these background layers to be displayed initially. We want that as part of our hover effect. So here's what we're going to do. And because we're working in a repeat grid, we can just do it once and it'll distribute. So I'm going to duplicate this image layer. Command and Control D, move it on up, just like this. And this is going to be used as sort of a hover effect, right? So I'm going to change the color to black, drop the opacity a little bit. And then we are going to grab our polygon tool, shortcut key Y. Let's go ahead and rotate this. Maybe I'll round out the corners just a little bit. Ooh, that looks pretty fancy, right? And now we have a nice play button. Let's take a look at how that looks. Very good. So what we want to do now is we want to include all of these three elements inside of a single component. So I'm going to select all of them. Command and Control K. You can also do it within your libraries panel, or you can press the plus button over to the right where components are, just like that. And now in the initial state, none of this will be visible. So I'm going to just dive in here and set the opacity to 0 on all of them. Just press the 0 key twice, or you can change the opacity within your properties inspector to the right. And now, if I add a hover state, I'm going to dive in here, bump the opacity to 100%. Now it's a little bit much, right? So this one we're going to drop to about, let's say 15%. Looks pretty good. And the image we're going to drop to about, let's say 50%, right? And now we're going to turn off the hover state. And now when you press play, we can hover over any of these. Now there's a little bit of a delay, right? And that's because auto animate is animating that transition. So if I hop into prototype mode, select any of these, right? The wire is all the way over there, but it did select it automatically. I'm going to change this to transition, and I'm going to go to none for animation. And now I can just hover very quickly over any of these, and it looks pretty fancy, right? Yeah. Now we can do the same thing for this heart. If we wanted to be able to override these hearts inside of a repeat grid, I'm going to select the heart layer, which is this one here, Command and Control K to turn it into a component. And now I can go into any of these other ones, select the heart, which is this one right here, and I can change the fill color. Let's give it a little bit of pink. Probably don't need that border. There we go. Right? So only one of those inside the repeat grid is now filled in because we're using components, right? There we go. So there's so much you can do with repeat grids and components. And just to show you what the final result was going to look like if we had more time. Basically this, we would use stacks and padding on the header. This was pretty much all the same, aside from, let me go ahead and hide the hover state, right? Same deal there. And then what's cool is once you start getting to stacks and padding, which we're going to get into tomorrow, you can just move things around and everything moves with it, right? Really cool stuff. So that's it for me for today, day number 8. Tomorrow we wrap things up with day number 9. Big thank you to everyone who has tuned in today. Stick around. Kyle T. Webster is coming up with a fun and exciting draw along. So stick around for that. And I will be back tomorrow with day number 9. Thanks so much, everyone.